She was only 8. On the edge of a quiet human colony, little Emma Chen played with her scrap metal robot under the twin suns, dreaming of stars and stories. But the Caliph Empire didn't care for innocence. They came with cameras, soldiers, and a message carved in cruelty. And in front of 1,000 watching systems, they made an example of a child, on live broadcast. What they didn't know was who her father was. Marcus Chen wasn't a soldier anymore. He had buried his guns, his name, and his past deep beneath the soil of exile. But when the broadcast reached him, humanity's silence shattered, and the galaxy began to tremble. The broadcast. The morning sun cast long shadows across Colony 7 as 8-year-old Emma Chen sat cross-legged in the dirt, carefully adjusting the tiny servo motors in her homemade robot. The little machine was cobbled together from salvaged parts, old data chips, worn-out communication relays, and bits of metal she had found in the scrap yards that dotted the colony's outskirts. "Come on, Sparky," she whispered to the palm-sized creation, using a bent screwdriver to tighten a loose connection. "Just need you to walk in a straight line today." Colony 7 was not much to look at. It was one of humanity's furthest settlements, a collection of prefabricated buildings and agricultural domes scattered across a planet that barely registered on most star maps. The colonists were farmers, mechanics, and families seeking a simple life far from Earth's crowded cities. They had no military installations, no strategic resources, nothing that should have attracted attention from the broader galaxy. That was exactly why the Caliph Empire had chosen it. Emma's robot took 3 wobbling steps before toppling over. She giggled and picked it up, brushing dust from its metal shell. Her father had taught her that persistence was the key to engineering. Every failure was just information about what not to do next time. The sound of approaching engines made her look up. 3 sleek ships descended from the pale sky, their hulls gleaming with the dark purple markings of the Caliph Empire. Emma had seen them in news broadcasts from other worlds. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, like predatory birds made of metal and energy. The ships landed in the colony's central square, their landing thrusters scorching the carefully maintained grass. Tall, elegant beings emerged from the craft. The Caliph were humanoid but stretched, as if someone had taken a human form and pulled it upward. Their skin was pale blue, almost translucent, and their eyes were large and completely black. They moved with fluid grace, but there was something cold about their movements, like watching ice flow down a mountain. Emma clutched her robot closer as colonists began gathering in the square. Her mother had told her to stay inside if the Caliph ever came, but curiosity won over caution. She crept closer, hiding behind a storage container where she could see and hear everything. The lead Caliph wore more elaborate robes than the others, with silver threads that seemed to move on their own. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the square without any visible amplification device. "Citizens of this minor world," he announced, "you have been selected for a demonstration. Your species has been spreading across the galaxy like a disease, claiming worlds, breeding without control. Today, the civilized races will see what happens to those who forget their place." Small flying cameras emerged from the Caliph ships, hovering around the square like mechanical insects. Emma realized with growing fear that whatever was about to happen was being broadcast across the galaxy. "Bring forward a representative of this colony's future," the Caliph leader commanded. "A child." The colonists looked at each other in confusion and fear. No one moved. The Caliph soldiers began walking through the crowd, their tall forms towering over the humans. One of them spotted Emma behind the container. "This one will suffice," the soldier said, reaching down with a long, pale hand. Emma tried to run, but the Caliph was faster. His grip was gentle but unbreakable as he lifted her and carried her to the center of the square. The flying cameras converged on her, their lenses focusing like hungry eyes. "What is your name, small human?" the leader asked. Emma's heart was pounding, but she remembered what her father had always told her about bullies. "Show them you're not afraid, even when you are." "Emma Chen," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "And what is that primitive device you carry?" Emma looked down at Sparky, still clutched in her hands. "It's my robot. I built it myself." The Caliph leader tilted his head, studying the crude construction. "Interesting. Your species persists in creating these mechanical servants, as if trying to compensate for your own limitations. Tell me, Emma Chen, what does this device do?" "It walks," Emma said simply. "Or it's supposed to. I'm still working on the balance algorithms." Several Caliph exchanged glances. One of them leaned close to their leader and whispered something in their musical language. The leader's expression shifted slightly, showing what might have been amusement. Balance algorithms, he repeated. You speak of complex mathematics as if it were a simple game. This is precisely the problem with your kind. You meddle with forces beyond your understanding and call it progress. Emma frowned. My dad says understanding starts with trying. Even if you fail, you learn something. Your father sounds like a typical human, the leader said dismissively, overconfident in your primitive capabilities. Tell me, child, where is this father of yours? He's not here, Emma said. He's on Earth, working for the Defense Corps, but he taught me that every problem has a solution if you're willing to work hard enough to find it. The cameras moved closer, capturing every word. Emma could see her reflection in their dark lenses, a small human girl surrounded by towering aliens while her neighbors watched in helpless silence. The Defense Corps, the leader mused. How fitting. Your species always turns to violence when faced with superior intellect. Very well, Emma Chen. Since your father serves those who would resist the natural order, you will serve as an example of what happens to the children of rebels. He gestured to one of his soldiers, who stepped forward with a weapon that looked like liquid metal shaped into the form of a rifle. The crowd gasped and several people started forward, but other Caliph soldiers raised their own weapons in warning. Emma looked up at the cameras, knowing that somewhere across the galaxy people were watching. Maybe her father was watching too, if he could access the broadcast feeds from his ship or base. My dad isn't just Defense Corps, she said clearly, her voice carrying across the square. He used to be Special Operations, Shadow Division. He told me stories about the things he did before I was born, before he settled down to be a regular soldier. The Caliph leader paused. Shadow Division? That name means nothing to me. It should, Emma said, and for the first time she smiled. They were the ones who ended the Vrex Rebellion, and the Stellar Uprising, and about a dozen other wars you probably never heard of because they finished them so quietly that nobody knew they were happening. She held up her little robot, its crude construction suddenly seeming less like a toy and more like a symbol of something larger. My dad taught me that humans don't just build things because we can. We build them because we have to, because when something threatens the people we love, we don't give up. We adapt. We learn. We find a way. The soldier with the liquid metal weapon looked to his leader for confirmation. The Caliph commander studied Emma for a long moment, his black eyes reflecting the morning sun. Perhaps your father will see this broadcast, he said finally. Perhaps he will come seeking revenge. If so, he will find only disappointment and death. The age of human expansion is ending, child. Your species has reached too far, grown too bold. It is time for a correction. Emma's grip tightened on her robot. You don't know my dad, she said quietly. When someone hurts his family, he doesn't get angry. He gets creative. The weapon fired with a sound like breaking glass. Emma fell without another word, her small form crumpling to the ground. Sparky rolled from her lifeless fingers, its metal shell catching the sunlight one last time before coming to rest in the dust. The cameras continued recording as the colonists wept and the Caliph soldiers returned to their ships. Within hours, the footage would be broadcast across every inhabited system, a message of terror meant to break the spirit of human resistance. But in a small apartment on Earth, Marcus Chen sat in stunned silence as he watched his daughter's final moments play out on his communication screen. He was a man of average height and build, with graying hair and weathered hands that spoke of years spent maintaining equipment in hostile environments. To anyone looking at him, he would seem like just another veteran trying to adjust to civilian life. They would be wrong. Marcus had indeed served in Shadow Division, though that unit officially didn't exist. He had spent 15 years solving problems that regular military couldn't handle, using methods that would never appear in any official report. When his wife died in a transport accident, he had requested transfer to regular Defense Corps duty so he could spend more time with Emma. The quiet life of a maintenance technician suited him fine. He had seen enough darkness for one lifetime. But as he watched the broadcast repeat on every news channel, as he saw his daughter's broken form lying in the dust of Colony 7, something cold and patient began to unfold in the depths of his mind. It was a part of himself he had buried years ago, a set of skills and instincts that had no place in a world of peace and family dinners. The Caliph had made a mistake. They had killed his child to send a message of fear to humanity. Instead, they had just reminded Marcus Chen who he used to be. He stood slowly, his movements deliberate and calm. In the back of his closet was a sealed container he hadn't opened in 8 years. Inside were tools and equipment that most people would never recognize, devices designed for problems that required permanent solutions. Marcus opened the container and began making preparations. The galaxy was about to learn why Shadow Division operated in the dark and why some humans were more dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. The war for humanity's future was about to begin, and it would start with the quiet vengeance of one grieving father who had been very, very good at his job. The Ghost Protocol. 3 days after the broadcast, Marcus Chen disappeared from his apartment on Earth without a trace. His neighbors assumed he had finally succumbed to grief and taken his own life. The Defense Corps listed him as absent without leave, then as a deserter when he failed to report for duty. His few remaining possessions were cataloged and stored, including a picture of Emma holding her latest robot creation, her gap-toothed smile frozen in time. None of them knew that Marcus was already 3-star systems away, sitting in the cargo hold of a freight hauler bound for the Outer Rim. He had called in favors that officially didn't exist, contacted people whose names appeared in no database, and activated protocols that had been gathering dust for nearly a decade. The freight hauler's captain was a grizzled woman named Torres, who had once smuggled Shadow Division operatives behind enemy lines during the Centauri conflict. She asked no questions when Marcus appeared at her ship with a single duffel bag and a credit chip worth more than her vessel. "You know I can't take you directly to Calith Space," she said as they settled into hyperspace. "My ship's registered with the Merchant Guild. They'll trace me back to Earth if anything happens." "I'm not going to Calith Space," Marcus replied, studying a star chart on his portable display. "Not yet. First I need to visit some old friends." The first stop was Kepler Station, a massive trade hub built inside a hollowed-out asteroid. It was the kind of place where questions weren't asked and credits spoke louder than laws. Marcus made his way through the crowded corridors to a repair shop buried deep in the station's industrial sector. The shop looked abandoned from the outside, its sign flickering with half-dead letters. But when Marcus pressed his palm to a scanner hidden beside the door, locks disengaged with a series of soft clicks. Inside, surrounded by the controlled chaos of electronic components and half-assembled devices, sat a man who looked like he had been carved from old leather in stubborn determination. His name was Singh, and he had been Shadow Division's primary tech specialist until a Vrex plasma mine took his right leg and most of his left arm. "Marcus," Singh said without looking up from the device he was assembling. "Saw the broadcast. Figured you'd turn up eventually." "I need gear, Singh. Full kit. And I need it to be invisible." Singh finally looked up, his artificial eye whirring as it focused. "Going after the Caliph? That's suicide, even for you. They've got a whole empire backing them." "Not the empire," Marcus said quietly. "Just the ones who killed Emma, the ones who thought murdering a child would make humanity kneel." Singh was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "Full kit will take 2 days. But Marcus, the gear isn't the problem. The Caliph aren't like the enemies we used to fight. They're not driven by greed or territory or ideology. They think they're evolution's gift to the galaxy. That makes them predictable in some ways, but also incredibly dangerous." "Predictable is good," Marcus said. "Predictable means I can plan for them." 2 days later, Marcus left Kepler Station with equipment that officially didn't exist. Stealth suits that bent light around the wearer, weapons that fired projectiles at significant fractions of light speed, and most importantly, a device Singh called the Whisper, a communication system that could tap into any network in the galaxy without leaving a trace. His next stop was the Epsilon Cluster, where he met with a woman known only as Ghost. She had been Shadow Division's intelligence coordinator, the person who could find anyone anywhere in the galaxy given enough time and motivation. They met in a cantina on a mining world where the background radiation made electronic surveillance impossible. Ghost looked exactly as she had 8 years ago, ageless, forgettable, the kind of person who could disappear in a crowd of 2. "The Caliph High Command operates from their homeworld, Ashkara Prime," she said, sliding a data chip across the scarred table. "But they're not stupid. After your daughter's broadcast went viral, they've tripled security on all their major installations." "Viral?" Marcus asked. Ghost smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. "You haven't been monitoring the networks, have you? Emma's final words have been playing on repeat across every human world. You don't know my dad. When someone hurts his family, he doesn't get angry. He gets creative. It's become a rallying cry. There have been protests, work stoppages, even some minor sabotage operations." She leaned forward. "The Caliph are calling it human terrorism. They've started cracking down on colonies across their territory. Which means if you're planning what I think you're planning, you need to move fast before they kill more innocents in retaliation." Marcus pocketed the data chip. "What about the command structure? Who gave the order?" "Admiral Thekris Valdane, Supreme Commander of the Caliph Third Fleet. He's the one who ordered the demonstration. Word is he's already planning similar broadcasts from other human colonies to maintain the fear factor. Where is he now? That's the interesting part, Ghost said. He's not hiding on Ashkara Prime. He's touring Calith installations in human space, making personal appearances to show that the Empire isn't afraid of human retaliation. His next stop is the Xerion system, where they've established a major forward base. Marcus stood to leave, but Ghost caught his arm. Marcus, I know what you're thinking. One man against an empire, but you taught us that the key to impossible missions was never fighting fair. Whatever you're planning, make sure it's big enough to matter and quiet enough that they never see it coming. The Xerion system was a week's travel from the Epsilon cluster. Marcus spent the journey studying every piece of intelligence Ghost had provided. The Calith forward base was built on Xerion 4, a barren moon with no atmosphere and no strategic value except its position along major shipping routes. Admiral Valdane was scheduled to arrive in 3 days for an inspection tour and ceremonial address to the base personnel. Security would be at maximum levels, with patrol ships, energy shields, and sensor arrays covering every approach vector. Marcus smiled for the first time since watching Emma die. The Calith were thinking like a traditional military force: overwhelming firepower, layers of defense, maximum visibility to intimidate potential enemies. They had never faced someone who had spent 15 years proving that the best way to kill a monster was to make it think it was safe. He began with the base's supply chain. The Calith, for all their technological superiority, still needed food, water, and replacement parts. Their supply ships followed predictable routes, used automated systems, and operated on schedules that hadn't changed in months. Marcus intercepted a supply freighter 2 days out from Xerion 4. He didn't destroy it or steal its cargo. Instead, he made a few subtle modifications to its automated systems and added some extra components to several supply containers. To any inspection, everything would appear normal. The freighter docked at Xerion 4, right on schedule. The Calith personnel unloaded the supplies and distributed them throughout the base according to standard procedures. The food went to the commissaries, the water too. The recycling systems, the spare parts to the maintenance bays. Admiral Valdane arrived the next day in a ship that was less a vessel than a statement, sleek, deadly, and beautiful in the way that only supreme confidence could create. He disembarked with full ceremony, his purple robes flowing behind him as he inspected honor guards and received status reports from base commanders. Marcus watched it all from orbit, invisible inside his stealth suit and clinging to the hull of a communications satellite. The whisper device let him tap into the base's internal networks, monitoring every conversation and data stream. The human colonies grow more restless each day, Valdane was saying to his staff in the base's command center. Perhaps it is time for another demonstration, something more dramatic than a single child, an entire settlement perhaps. Sir, one of his aides said, there have been reports of unusual activity in several systems. Ships disappearing, supply convoys going off course, communication arrays going offline. Intelligence suggests it might be related to the human we executed. Valdane laughed, the sound carrying clearly through the base's communication system. One aging human soldier? Even if this shadow division existed, what could one man do against the might of the Calith Empire? Continue with the plan. I want a list of human colonies suitable for the next broadcast within the week. That night, as Admiral Valdane slept in his luxurious quarters, Marcus put his plan into motion. The modifications he had made to the supply freighter began to activate. The food dispensers in the commissaries released a colorless, odorless gas that put the night shift into a deep sleep. The water recycling systems introduced nanomachines that temporarily disrupted the Calith nervous system, causing disorientation and confusion. The spare parts he had added to maintenance supplies began broadcasting false signals that crashed the base's security systems. Within an hour, Xerion base was effectively blind and helpless. Marcus moved through the installation like a whisper of death, using corridors that didn't appear on any schematic and moving with the fluid grace of someone who had learned to make himself invisible. He found Admiral Valdane's quarters and entered without triggering a single alarm. The Calith commander was unconscious but breathing, his tall form sprawled across a bed designed to accommodate his species' unusual proportions. Marcus could have killed him then. It would have been easy, clean, and satisfying. But death was too simple for someone who had murdered Emma for the entertainment of the galaxy. Instead, Marcus began to work with tools that Singh had specially designed for this moment. When he was finished, Admiral Valdane would wake up to find his life fundamentally changed in ways that would serve as a message to the entire Calith Empire. But Marcus wasn't done with Xerion base. Before leaving, he accessed the base's communication array and sent a message that would reach every Calith installation in human space. The message was simple: direct and utterly terrifying in its implications. "This is Marcus Chen, Emma's father. You killed my daughter to frighten humanity. Instead, you have reminded us what we are capable of when we stop playing by your rules. Admiral Valdane is alive, but he will never again be the same. This is not revenge. This is education. You are going to learn why Shadow Division was created, and why some humans are more dangerous when they have nothing left to lose." The message ended with an image of Emma's robot, Sparky, somehow restored and walking in perfect balance. By the time the base's automated systems came back online, Marcus was gone. But his message had already spread across the galaxy, copied and transmitted by networks both official and underground. The Calith Empire had wanted to demonstrate their power by executing a human child. Now they were about to learn that humanity's power had never been in their ships or weapons. It had always been in their refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat seemed inevitable. Admiral Valdane woke up to find himself changed in ways that would make him a living reminder of what happened to those who hurt human children. And across the galaxy, other Calith commanders began to wonder if their empire was as secure as they had believed. The ghost was awake, and he was coming for them all. The reckoning news of Admiral Valdane's fate spread through Calith space like a virus. The official reports were classified, but rumors had a way of growing in the dark. Some said the human had turned the Admiral inside out without killing him. Others claimed he had been transformed into something that was no longer truly Calith. The truth was somehow worse than any rumor. Valdane had been left alive, but Marcus had used Calith biotechnology against itself. Nanomachines now flowed through the Admiral's system, broadcasting everything he saw and heard directly to human resistance networks. He had become an unwilling spy in the heart of the Calith command structure, and there was no way to remove the devices without killing him. The psychological effect on the Calith leadership was immediate and profound. If their most secure base could be infiltrated so easily, if their highest-ranking officers could be compromised without anyone noticing, then nowhere was safe. Emperor Kethvar himself called an emergency session of the High Council on Ashkara Prime. The throne room was a cathedral of dark crystal and flowing energy, designed to inspire awe and submission in all who entered. Today, it felt like a tomb. "Explain to me," the Emperor said, his voice echoing off crystalline walls, "how one human has managed to paralyze our entire frontier command structure." General Nexaris, the Empire's chief military strategist, shifted nervously. "Your Magnificence, we are dealing with an opponent who operates outside all known tactical parameters. This Marcus Chen appears to have capabilities that exceed our intelligence estimates of human potential." "He is one aging soldier," the Emperor snarled. "We are an empire that spans 3,000 star systems. How is this even a discussion?" "Because," said a new voice from the shadows, "you made the mistake of underestimating what a human becomes when you take away everything he has to lose." The assembled Calith spun toward the voice, weapons appearing in pale hands with fluid grace. But the speaker stepped into the light with his hands empty and visible, a man of average height wearing simple clothes that somehow made him more intimidating than any armor could have. Marcus Chen had infiltrated the most secure location in the Calith Empire. He stood in the throne room of their emperor, surrounded by their greatest warriors and most powerful leaders, and he looked completely calm. "How?" Emperor Kethvar whispered. "Your security is designed to stop armies and fleets," Marcus said conversationally. "It's not designed to stop someone who thinks like a maintenance worker. I've been here for 3 days, fixing your environmental systems, updating your computer networks, making sure your coffee dispensers work properly. Amazing how invisible you become when people assume you belong." General Nexaris raised his weapon, but Marcus held up a small device. "I wouldn't. This is connected to every major system in your palace. Life support, gravity generators, the containment fields around your power core. I've had 3 days to make improvements to your infrastructure. Some of those improvements are more unstable than others." The Emperor leaned forward on his throne, black eyes reflecting the crystal formations around them. "What do you want, human? Revenge for your offspring? We can arrange suitable compensation." "Compensation?" Marcus's voice remained level, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "You killed my 8-year-old daughter on live broadcast to send a message to humanity. You thought murdering a child would make us kneel. What kind of compensation do you think would be suitable for that?" "Name your terms," the Emperor said. "Territory, resources, a position of authority in our administration of human space. We are not unreasonable." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying the assembled Calith leadership. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made the crystal walls seem to vibrate. "You don't understand what you've done," he said. "You think this is about revenge. You think I'm here because I'm angry. But anger is hot and stupid and burns itself out quickly. What I am is something much more dangerous. I'm disappointed." He began walking slowly around the throne room, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. "For years, humanity has tried to find its place in the galaxy peacefully. We've followed your trade regulations, respected your territorial claims, accepted second-class status because we thought it was better than war. We believed that eventually, through patience and diplomacy, we could earn respect." Marcus stopped in front of a massive display showing the extent of the Caleth Empire. "But you killed Emma to prove a point. You murdered a child who was building robots and dreaming of the future because you wanted to remind everyone that humans don't matter, that our children don't matter, that our dreams don't matter." Emperor Kethvar straightened on his throne. "Your species has always been inferior. This demonstration was merely making that reality clear to—" "Stop," Marcus said quietly, and somehow that single word carried more authority than all the Emperor's shouted commands. "You're not listening. I said I was disappointed, not angry. Angry would have been easier for you." He turned to face the assembled leadership, and for the first time, they could see what he really was beneath his calm exterior. Not rage, but something far more terrifying, absolute, implacable determination. "You see, when I was angry, I just wanted to hurt the people who killed Emma. Admiral Valdane and his strike team, maybe a few of their commanders. That would have been proportional. That would have been fair." Marcus's hand moved to the device he was holding, finger hovering over a control surface. "But disappointment is different. Disappointment makes you realize that the problem isn't just a few bad actors. The problem is the entire system that made those actions seem reasonable. The problem is an empire that thinks murdering children is acceptable theater." General Nixaris stepped forward. "Human, you cannot seriously be threatening the entire Caleth Empire. We have fleets, armies, weapons that could crack planets. You are one man with a single explosive device." Marcus smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Who said anything about explosives? I told you I spent 3 days improving your infrastructure. Those improvements were much more sophisticated than simple bombs." He pressed a control on his device. Throughout the palace, screens began displaying information. Fleet movements, resource allocations, classified military communications. But more than that, personal files, private communications, evidence of corruption and war crimes stretching back decades. "Your communication networks are now broadcasting everything," Marcus said as Caleth leaders watched their deepest secrets spill across public channels. "Every order, every private message, every classified document, the entire galaxy is watching your empire tear itself apart from the inside." Emperor Kethvar rose from his throne, his pale form trembling with rage. "This accomplishes nothing. Even if you expose our secrets, we still control the fleets, the armies, the resources. You have won a propaganda victory, nothing more." "Have I?" Marcus asked. He pressed another control, and the displays changed to show something that made the assembled Caleth leaders freeze in horror. Ships, thousands of them, emerging from hyperspace around Ashkara Prime. But these weren't Caleth vessels, they were human ships, but not like any the Empire had seen before. Sleek, dark, and utterly silent, they moved with a coordination that spoke of years of planning and preparation. "You thought Shadow Division was just a legend," Marcus said as the ships took positions around the planet. "You thought it was disbanded after the last war. You were wrong. We've been watching, waiting, preparing for the day when someone would push humanity too far." General Nixaris stared at the tactical displays in disbelief. "Impossible. Our intelligence networks would have detected such a fleet." "Your intelligence networks have been feeding you information that we wanted you to see," Marcus replied. "For 8 years, every report about human military capability, every assessment of our industrial production, every estimate of our technological development, all of it carefully crafted to make you believe we were weak and divided." He gestured toward the screens showing the surrounding fleet. "Shadow Division never disbanded. We just became better at staying hidden. While you were conquering primitive worlds and making theatrical demonstrations, we were building, learning, preparing." The Emperor's voice was barely a whisper. "What do you want?" "Justice," Marcus said simply. "Not revenge, not conquest, not subjugation. Justice. Every world your empire has enslaved will be freed. Every species you've oppressed will be given the chance to govern itself. Every war crime will be investigated and prosecuted." He paused, his expression softening slightly as he pulled out a small device. Emma's robot, somehow restored and walking in perfect mechanical balance. "My daughter believed that every problem had a solution if you were willing to work hard enough to find it. The problem with your empire isn't that you're evil, though you are. The problem is that you never learned the most important lesson humanity has to offer. Which is? The Emperor asked. Marcus looked up from the tiny robot, his eyes holding depths of loss and determination that made even the Caliph leadership step back. That the measure of a civilization isn't how much power it can accumulate, but how it treats the weakest and most innocent of those under its protection. You failed that test when you killed Emma. You failed it so completely that there's no redemption possible, only consequences. The screens around the throne room lit up with incoming communications from across the Caliph Empire. Rebellions were breaking out on dozens of worlds as the exposed secrets triggered uprisings. Caliph fleet commanders were surrendering rather than fight against an enemy that had outmaneuvered them so completely. The carefully maintained order of the Empire was collapsing in real time. This is impossible, General Nexaris said, staring at the cascade of reports. How could you have coordinated all of this? The logistics alone would require years of planning. Marcus pocketed Emma's robot and looked at the device in his other hand. It did require years of planning. Shadow Division has been preparing for this moment since the day the Caliph Empire first made contact with humanity. We knew that eventually someone would push too far. We just didn't know it would be over the murder of a little girl who liked to build robots. He pressed the final control on his device. Around the galaxy, human sleeper agents activated simultaneously. Caliph installations that had seemed secure were suddenly compromised from within. Supply lines that had operated smoothly for decades ground to a halt. Communication networks that had carried imperial orders began broadcasting messages of liberation instead. You wanted to send a message to humanity, Marcus said as the Caliph Empire began its final collapse. You wanted to show us what happened to those who defied your authority. Congratulations, your message was received. He turned toward the throne room's massive windows, where the human fleet hung in space like a promise of justice finally fulfilled. Now let me send a message to the galaxy. This is what happens when you hurt our children. This is what happens when you mistake human patience for human weakness. And this is what happens when you forget that the most dangerous human is not the one who threatens violence, but the one who quietly prepares to make sure justice is served. Emperor Kethvar slumped on his throne as reports continued pouring in of his empire's dissolution. What happens to us now? Marcus was already walking toward the exit, his mission complete. You'll stand trial for your crimes, all of you. But unlike you, we believe in justice rather than vengeance. Unlike you, we believe that even our enemies deserve the protection of law. He paused at the threshold and looked back one last time. My daughter died believing that understanding starts with trying, even if you fail. Your empire failed because you never tried to understand that the strength of humanity has never been in our weapons or our ships. It's in our refusal to accept that any problem is truly unsolvable, no matter how impossible it seems. Marcus Chen walked out of the throne room of the Caliph Empire, leaving behind the ruins of an empire that had thought itself invincible. Behind him, Emma's words echoed in the minds of every being in the galaxy. You don't know my dad. When someone hurts his family, he doesn't get angry. He gets creative. The galaxy had learned at last what it meant to be human.